Hi, welcome to GRC Me, a podcast where we interview governance, risk, and compliance thought leaders on hot topics, industry-specific challenges, and trends to learn more about their methods, solutions, and outlooks in the space, and hopefully have a little fun doing it. I'm your host, Chris Clarke. With me is Dorian Cougias, co-founder of Unified Compliance and the primary architect of the Unified Compliance Framework and the compliance portal, the UCF Common Controls Hub. Dorian serves as an advisor and working group member to the Payment Card Industry Council, Financial Technology Forum, and other industry organizations. Dorian, you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh boy, I don't know how much you want to know about me. And you guys can find it all on my LinkedIn profile. It's DCOUGIAS. I've been around this industry before this was gray, and the stuff that's way down here before gravity took it was way up here. We've been doing this for quite a while, and it's a neat industry, and I work with a lot of really brilliant people. And that's what you really need to know. The great part is that I'm not the smart guy here. I'm every time I go into a meeting, I'm the dumbest guy in the room, which is pretty cool.
That's a great feeling. Do you mind talking a little bit about what UCF is and just like what some of the benefits of using it are?
Sure. The Unified Compliance Framework is a methodology for, we do mapping for you, defensible mapping for you. That's the most important part. It was born out of the need that was expressed when the person from Washington, D.C. called me up and said, hey, look, I've got a problem. I've got 4 authority documents, regulations, laws, standards. That's what we call authority documents. We group them all into one. And he said, I've got 4 of them. One of them says, close the tap. One of them says, turn off the spigot. One of them says, shut the faucet. And the 4th one says, swing the tennis racket. I said, okay. He said, well, how do you prove when they're the same and when they're different? And I said, well, it's common sense, right? He said, no. We got to do it in language. We've got to do it defensible. We've got to do it in a way that we can then expand on this. And it wasn't as easy to do as I thought it would be. And so we had to come up with a methodology for searching text and for saying and having similarity and more importantly, dissimilarity rules. That's what the Unified Compliance Framework is the framework for saying, when is this similar to this, and therefore harmonizing or deduplicating the rules, and then when is that different? And more importantly, so when you look at it, we break it down into predicates and subject. Let's go back to Fraggle Rock. Let's get the the English part. What's a predicate? What's a subject? All that stuff. With Sister Mary Knucklebuster back in grade school, and so we synonyms, antonyms, hypernyms, hyponyms, very very similar. And then when it gets into and by the way, people can't do this. You have to have computers to do this because you have to have rule systems. Mm-hmm. And there's so much of it that comes up. You have to have rule systems to start reading this for you. So one set of rule systems broke it into, is this a sentence? Let's tokenize it. And here's the first word you've got to know. What's our corpora? Okay, because all of your sentences, all of the stuff you're reading, that becomes your corpora, and you're going to have to manage that. You're going to see a lot of that word coming up lately. NVIDIA just did a deal with one of your competitors where they're using large language models. That's another word. The large language model is the biggest corporas out there. We're talking 1 billion words. You're not going to have that many words in your compliance dictionary. But the first thing that they said was, hey, in this partnership, we're going to use these large language models, but you're also going to have to train them with your corpora. So right now, let's just say our corpora is 4 sentences. Shut the tap, turn off the spigot, close the faucet, swings the tennis racket. So the predicates have to go in there. And when you're using machines to read that, turn off is what's called a multi-word expression. So we had to build our machine system to look at multi-word expressions and be able to tag those. That's part of the framework. And then the other part of the framework is deciding when turn off, shut, and close are the same when they're different. Faucet, spigot, the other. And that has to tie a dictionary in. So that's the second thing you're going to need to know is how does your dictionary used to tie those things together? So really the unified compliance framework is a fancy way of saying we can take all these sentences and put them in your bucket. And then we can take all of these words. And when Joe is saying shut and Tammy's saying turn off and Fred over there is saying close, we know it's the same thing. So that's our dictionary part. And then the framework for harmonizing it is we know that shut, turn off, close, spigot, faucet are the same. And then we, more importantly, know that swing and tennis racket are not. That's really the nuts and bolts of the entire unified compliance framework. It can come down to those simple things. How do you take the sentences, stick them in a bucket for examining it? How do you take the words, define the meanings, and then use those definitions to say when is something the same and when isn't it?
And then allow Joe and Tammy to go and compare against that to see where.
Exactly. And Joe and Tammy and Sammy. And then taking it even farther and saying, okay, well, if we're going to teach somebody to turn something off, there's this dude named Bloom, the Bloom's taxonomic rules. As a matter of fact, if you're into education, this be the book right here. I'll stick it up really close to the camera. It's about Bloom's taxonomy, and you're going to hear a lot about it, especially with the cybersecurity communities and this NICE and the government's ONET training curriculum, because this dude named Bloom said every time you go to do something, there's a level of understanding you have to do it. You know, the level for turning something off is pretty short, right? But the level for maybe configuring, you know, if you're configuring a router, well, there's a level of education you're going to have for configuring predicate this asset. And that has to match education levels. That's also built into our framework. Yeah. The other thing built into our framework is that thing you're doing something to, that subject, you know, that the light, the spigot, the tennis racket. When you start getting into compliance things like configuration guidance, you need to know what those are, because I need to pass to a logic gate. Hey, you know, when we're going to go implement this, you've got to go find that spigot, that faucet, that tap, and ensure that it's what? Turned off. Mm. So it sets up how you can audit something. And if anybody's ever seen My Cousin Vinny, remember My Cousin Vinny?
Yeah.
Well, it's cool because that's what I was taught, funny enough, by a lawyer. This is how we have to audit things in compliance. My Cousin Vinny won his court case when, remember at the very end, we're talking about he was cross-examining his fiance. Yep. And she talked about the differential axle thing. Well, it was based upon, can you examine this asset? Does this asset have this configuration item? Does it have a straight axle or does it have that differential axle? That's the same thing in audit for us in compliance. You know, you have to look at the asset to know what you can do with it. When he was talking to the dude about cooking the grits, right?
Yeah, 20 minutes.
You know, what was he doing? He was testing a process. When he had all those pictures in front of the guy about, you know, looking through the that dirty window, through those bushes, through those trees, he was examining evidence. Mm-hmm. Same thing in compliance. You can examine records. You can't test a record, but you can examine a record. Mm-hmm. If you got processes out there, somebody's got to observe the process. If you have an asset, you check the configuration for the assets. And that all goes into the compliance framework. And, you know, it gives us those rules for how to look at those subjects and predicates, what we can do with them, and then how we can audit them.
That's so interesting. I love the example. And I think it's kind of a nice segue. So you mentioned, you know, corpus, you mentioned large language models. And then you, in particular, I think the interesting part is defining that corpus as well.
Right.
Like we we kind of encounter that decent amount here at LogicGate, where we call like use cases within our platform applications. And that works if you know LogicGate. However,
Right.
if you're just like a typical, you work in IT and you say an application, that would typically define LogicGate as a whole, because that is the software application more broadly that is being defined. And so defining those at each level and as it's relevant, it seems strong. Where, as we start to go deeper into this, like into artificial intelligence and kind of a brand new framework, I know corpus, large language model, those were corpora were new words to me. Like, what are some other terms or just phrases that people listening to this or thinking about AI should be aware of?
Okay, everybody who's listening to this podcast, this is how you show up your bosses. So there are 15 words you can use to show up your boss about artificial intelligence and how it applies to GRC that you've got to know. None of these are going to get you a date in the bar, unless you're like at some nerd bar.
That's what you think.
Well, all right. If you're in Silicon Valley, they'll get you a date. I live in Las Vegas. My wife was reading what I was writing, and I'm looking off to the left over here because I looked at it myself. Robotic process automation. My wife went, really? But there are 15 core terms that you have to know that apply to artificial intelligence as it applies to governance, risk, and compliance. And funny enough, robotic process automation is one of the keys because AI in the GRC space is divided into three parts. It's divided into robotic process automation, one big chunk. It's divided into data and risk analytics that also can be used for harmonization. And then it's divided into this new thing that everybody's all hot and bothered about, but they have no concept of what it's really doing, called generative content. That's your ChatGPT. That's your other thing that's going on out there. So that's the world that we live in right now. Those three parts, and robotic process automation is one of the key terms you need to know, and also about a third of how AI applies to what we're doing. And all of that, if you want to throw a term around to your board or your supervisors, it all falls under reg tech. Yeah, we do AI reg tech here.
I think a lot of those are new, but when you talk about and you kind of bring in like robotic process automation algorithms, that's a little bit more familiar to me. But to your point, everyone's kind of like on this ChatGPT train. It's the generative that's the hot new thing. But it seems, I know the other two have been around for a while. Why do you think the ChatGPT has made waves in the more popular media in a way that like algorithms and robotic process automation hasn't recently? Is it because it's just new? Is it because, No,
when data and risk analytics came out, it was new, but nobody gave a crap. I know. I was keynoting a seminar, and I had 100 people in it, and the other guys had 400 people. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm preaching to the nerds. The reason ChatGPT, and I was talking to the oldest son who's just finishing law school, and he's talking to me about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence is brand new. Wow, this is great. And I said, why do you think it's so hot in law school right now? He's not at Chapman. And he said, oh, that's simple, because it writes for us. Mm-hmm. It thinks for us. So it's not thinking for you. It's really just regurgitating other stuff that's out there. And his answer was, yeah, but that means I don't have to. Risk and data analytics, you still have to do something with that. Mm-hmm. You still have to look at it. You have to apply it. Robotics process automation, man, you're deep in the woods with rule sets and everything else like that. That's for the seriously nerdy folks in the group. But anybody can use generative content to create my slides for me, create a tweet about this, write a silly poem, I was talking to one of the guys from Tutela, one of your integrators, and I said, what do you think? There's a conference in town. They're all in town, and some of our clients in there. I went to speak, and I said, well, what are you using it for? And the guy said, I wrote a children's book with it.
Wow. Yeah.
I said, is it any good? He goes, my 3-year-old thinks so.
That's awesome. It's so funny that you bring that up. This is a kind of side topic, but I was looking through stuff on this, and I saw like a meme around how, we all thought when AI came, it was coming for our jobs, for our for doing these things. And what it really came for, it came for our art, right? It started to generate images. It started to generate like poems and like the things that we, almost thought were like only humans could create. And so it's kind of interesting, like how wrong we were in that prediction, at least.
Well, when you really think about it, it's not generating.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line between stealing wholeheartedly, which is what it does, and creating something absolutely new. Now that's the Skynet of the world. That's when oh my God, they might come for us. When that thing goes live, because right now, even if you look at the art they're using, and there's, matter of fact, Italy is really pissed off about this. The art that they're using to create new art will sometimes still even have the original artist's signature on the piece that it's copying out. So, there are again, I gave you guys a couple papers. One of the papers that people here are going to need to know about are the data protections and licensing affecting text for data mining, because that's what these things do. They data mine. Okay. If you go and ask ChatGPT, what are the core tenets of a unified compliance framework? It's literally going to steal the 4 paragraphs that I wrote, because that's the only thing in its corpora. And it's going to reword it slightly. But if I was kidding around with my lawyer. I said, look, if I took it in, who can I sue for intellectual property theft? Because that's mine. Yeah. That's and it didn't cite me. And that's the big thing. And ChatGPT right now, even if you ask it to cite somebody, it's just making crap up. It literally is. What is it? We did a test. A friend in Italy wrote a couple papers, and we knew the 10 papers that surrounded what we were writing, because it was very, very esoteric. So we asked it to give us some content on the subject, and then asked it, using Chicago Manual, 7th, whatever, give us paragraph and section on this and all the citations. And it gave us these ResearchGate citations, which we knew ResearchGate had. That's where they publish the peer review journal that I write for. That's where they'd put it up there. And I thought, wow, cool. It's got ResearchGate citations. Then I went to look them up. Not only didn't exist, but after I got a hold of the editor of ResearchGate, they never existed. Those titles, because he's got, he can go into his Wayback Machine in his archives. You can see anything that's ever been published there. Not only were those URLs the wrong URLs, but the titles of the paper they gave had never been submitted. The authors, and some of the authors were up there, but a lot of the authors were grouped together in groupings that never worked together before. And then when I asked a friend of mine over at OpenAI, very funny, if they wanted to tap me as the head of governance, risk, and compliance at OpenAI, I went, oh, nope, not going to happen. and other than the fact that I'm like the CEO of a company. But I said to him, I said, you guys have got a problem, because you're making stuff up. And he said, well, it's trained on a large language model, and it's trained on how humans write and how humans think, and humans lie. And so if we train it on that, it's going to do the same thing humans do. So why do you think it's any different? There's no ethos. There's no morality to a machine. It will do the most expedient thing. That's crazy.
Yeah. I know there's been a lot of discussions around like how to train it on the ethics of it and all that. So it's fascinating that kind of the first ethical dilemma that it immediately does is lying, right? It's just not telling the truth around it.
Right. And then when you catch it on it, it's, oh my God, it's like I have a 5-year-old nephew,
Yeah.
and I caught him fibbing the other day, and I said, I know you're fibbing, and he kind of gave a little bit, and I said, oh no, come on, let's go, and then he gave me, and it finally fessed up to the whole thing. If you go to ChatGPT and say, no, that citation's wrong, it will say, I'm sorry. And then, I'll try to correct myself. And then you say, no, that's wrong too. Oh, I'm sorry. And, and it will maybe try to work its way in. And then finally it'll say, I don't know where that citation came from. Even though it does, because it should be tracked in its corpora. If you're doing, so that's the other thing. When you're building a corpora in your corporations to train the model for what you're doing, you need to build your corpora management system so that as you're putting all those sentences in, you're tying them to the internal documents that they came from. Because the other big part that you've got to know that you have to tie to AI, you actually have to tie to everything in compliance, is the concept of explainability. And there's an explainability AI model that people can pull from that you need to apply to these things. But everything you're doing has to have explainability. That's one of the things we built into the Unified Compliance Framework. If anybody ever goes to our ucfmapper.com, they can go up there and see how we're mapping things. And they can even go and see how we're arguing with each other or the auditors about how something's mapped, because we have to do it to PCAOB standards. So, they're going to have to build explainability into everything that they're doing with this.
It's fascinating you bring up the explainability piece, because if we think about our typical use cases or everything we do in GRC, right? Like if you do an audit, you're testing a control, you need to provide evidence on that the control has been performed. If you are performing a third-party risk assessment and the third party says, yeah, we're SOC 2 certified, you never would just accept that. You'd be like, okay, right, give me the report. And so it's fascinating that we as humans just kind of inherently trust that ChatGPT is telling us something based on evidence, rather than pushing for that evidential collection off of it, especially in the GRC space where you would just, we are trained to want that documentation and that evidence as well.
And so, when you're looking at the generative AI part in organizations, because that's where everybody's going to want to play right now, write me a policy based on this thing, here's the challenge that I have for them right now. Take one citation from an authority document you have to follow. Find a simple one, NIST 800 AC3, whatever it is, find one citation and say, write a policy statement that follows this citation, and watch, then go on in and compare what you're reading with what it writes and ask yourself, could you defend that? You're going to find more than 50% of the time you can't. I did this. I wrote a piece. It's up on our website somewhere about how it came out in the last newsletter. How to, matter of fact, when we were promoting Logic Gate, and one of the things was how to use ChatGPT to start writing policies, and then how to check it for when it goes wrong and take those parts out.
Yeah.
But what it is good at is generating Reiki charts.
Okay.
Who's responsible, who's accountable, who should be communicated with, who should be informed or maybe misinformed, as the case may be. And then it'll do that, and it'll what's really, really cool, and I'm just so into, which part of the compliance is code, is it will then give it a policy. If you feed it a policy, if you feed a procedure, you can then say, create a plant UML session flow diagram or user flow diagram or a deployment diagram based on this procedure, and it will create you an auditable diagram in plant UML right then and there. Yeah. And if you look at it, they match, and they've matched 100% of the time in everything we've thrown at it. So much so that we're seeing. And Plant UL is another one of those. So Plant UML, this is fun. plant UML, and so this is where that robotics part, that's the first piece, and then that analytic part are starting to blend, because now my organization is completely we're completely remote. I'm in Denmark, I'm in the U.S., all over the U.S. I'm in the Canary Islands. I want to make that my next office. We're everywhere. And when we have to go past our audits, we use the C4/plant UML method to have our systems document where we live. Because there ain't going to be a human in my organization that's going to keep up with where we're deploying parts of what we're doing. So that the robotics automation part is going out to Amazon and Microsoft and saying, document thyself using the C4 plant UML methodology, deliver that documentation to us so that we can then put that into our compliance portfolio. So the UCF is now accepting plant UML as one of the elements within UCF. And that is both then, robotic automation of documentation and analytics, because we can pass that analytics over to, our CloudStrike or something else like that says, okay, now examine this amorphous border and tell us what the risks and threats are that are going to hit that. 2 sections of AI. And that would be really, really cool if I can get that generative part that says, and then write the board report for me every month.
Right. That's always our dream. That's awesome. So we talk about those 3 and we kind of talk about combinations of those 3. When you think about the future and as we're going to continue to invest and grow on AI, like which of those 3 keeps you up at night? Like where are you worried the most about from an AI perspective and why?
I'm not worried for me. I'm worried for your clients.
Okay.
And I'm going to go back to the 2 core things because, Vince Lombardi, when he took over the Packers, famously walked in and said, "Gentlemen, this is a football." It started there. Everybody's into the surface level BS of using ChatGPT to write things and all this other crap. What they don't understand is you have to train the model. Okay. That's what keeps me up at night, because they're not training the model on what they're doing with their language. And what's keeping me up at night is we don't have a standardized industry methodology for establishing and maintaining corpora. That bucket of where we're going to put things. All right. You go to any organization. Hey, listeners, go to your CTO, go to your CIO and say, hey, if we're going to do this thing, what's the corpora management tool we're using? Yeah, crickets farting. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get crickets farting. Okay. You got to figure that out. We can help. We maintain a corpora. I don't even have a corpora service or API to sell you. I'd love to say, oh, and I have the answer here.
Here we go.
I don't. I have one for me, which is very, very, very robust, but I don't have one for you. And you're going to have to build one. And nobody's talking about an industry standard for that yet.
So can I pause you real quick on that?
Yeah.
So, we're talking about that through the lens of like AI, right? Like you need some common definitions, you need some common corpora. Why is that different than like a human writing or like hiring someone to write your policies as a human versus like going to ChatGPT? Like where does
okay.
Why is that different?
It's I'm gonna give you a real for instance.
Okay.
Much apologies to you, Mr. Jackson. I'm now going to tell a story out of school. Michael Jackson is, believe it or not, his real name was Michael Jackson, and I loved him. He worked for the FDIC and the FFIEC, and by the way, he's like 6'4", and he hated it when you would walk up and go, "I like Michael." But they came to us, one of our earliest clients, and they said, "We got a problem. humans are writing our FFIEC audit guides. I said, okay, what's the problem? He said, we got 9 of them. I said, yeah. He said, do you know how many different ways we're saying the same thing and using the same words to say different things? When we did deduplication and harmonization of their internal documents, not industry documents. Look, here's one document. This one document, each document had anywhere between 40 and 60% overlap because they were saying the same thing different ways or different things the same way. So when you have multiple humans working on it, this is why I say humans can't do mapping. These are not stupid people. These are really smart people that I really, really, really respected and respect to this day. I make fun of Michael because he became a friend. And I can, and I'm out of arm's length because he pounded me for telling these stories. But seriously, they had 60% duplication. That's why you need a corpora. That's why you have to have in this world, you have to have this thing to put it together. And you need that second part, which is a corporate dictionary. Yeah. Now, here's the second story on this one, and Stephen Piliero can back me on it. Jody Mack from Moxie PLC was there, the PR firm, a bunch of people from NIST. I know you NIST guys are going to yell at me when you hear this one. So I was really, really mad. We went to Gaithersburg. We met with the NIST guys, and they were first coming out with the NIST cybersecurity standard. And they'd asked us to work on it and help dedupe it and map it. And I realized that they were talking about cybersecurity different throughout the document. They had multiple authors. And typical Dorian fashion, I'm kind of like a bull in a china shop if you haven't figured that part out yet. I got mad and I grabbed them all in the same room. And I said, okay, this is horse crap. I'm reading this thing, and the way I'm reading it, I've got a bunch of different definitions of cybersecurity because you're using it in different ways. So I gave everybody a piece of paper and a pen. And I said, without cheating, write your definition of cybersecurity. I won't tell you how many authors were in the room. I picked them up, and there was one more definition than there were authors. And I said, okay, how did that work?
Yeah, I don't even know how that math works.
I said, how's that math work? Did somebody spawn, another invisible person here? How do we get more definitions? And then we started looking through them, and we had, it was just slightly less than the total number of people there, materially different definitions. And I finally said, who wrote 2? And one guy raised his hand. I said, why'd you write 2? He said, I didn't know which one was right. I said, dude, you're writing the National Cybersecurity Standard. How can you have 2 definitions? And how can this august group of people come up with this many materially different definitions and not talk to each other? Because that's what humans do. Yeah. We all think we know. Anybody who's ever been married darn well knows that you use the same words to mean different things. And different words mean the same thing. Because you've had that conversation with your wife, your kids, everybody except your dog. Because your dog intuitively knows what you're talking about. Your cats are ignoring you. So they don't even come into the picture. The only ones that know what's going on really in the world is dogs. Because I think dogs are just sucking it out of our brain what we really mean. They're just not listening to the words. But everybody else, we're doing those different things. Machines don't do that. And how these large language models work, how AI works, is it literally, I don't know if I sent the screenshot to you guys last night or not, but I grabbed a screenshot from the Amazon package we use, which is very, very advanced. And right in there, it says, here's how to tie in your synonyms, your antonyms, your hypernyms, your hyponyms. And your dictionary will go into our reading of your corpora, so that our similarity engine can work. Because when that guy says privacy policy, and that person says personal privacy policy, and that one says the data privacy policy of personal information, we know it's the same thing. That's why the second part of that puzzle is your dictionary. And ain't no one talking about how to handle that.
Yeah.
Either of those two things.
So I'd be interested in like, if you're looking at a risk management program, you're setting thresholds. So what, like with the dictionary, and I'm going to blame English, but like with the English language, you're always going to have some level of interpretation and like difference in definition. So like where do you recommend organizations set their like risk threshold around that corpora and around that dictionary? And like, is it okay to have a little bit of wiggle room on what cybersecurity means, on what?
So what so if you're doing it right, I'm going to go back to that second part, that the analysis and the harmonization.
Mm-hmm.
When you're sucking your data into your corpora, your NLP engine, natural language processing engine, is going to do this thing called extraction and interpretation. And it's going to find multi-word expressions and you're going to have to teach it. And as you're doing that, you're going to be assigning, this is the term, and this is the definition of the term in that instance. Okay, this is the definition of the term in that instance. That definition of the term in that instance. There's the wiggle room comes down, the risk comes down the more you're using those definitions, because then it can look at the instances. It can say, okay, in that instance, we understand that that's the use. And in that instance, we understand that's the use. Does that make sense?
Does, yeah. So you are training it in some way.
You're training it on the definitions. And what it's called and if anybody really wants a term that's way out there, I didn't even put it into the terms you need to know. It's called definition encoded distance vectors. All of these guys do this stuff with vector analysis, right? It's drawing things and whatever. I have a hysterical paper I wrote on vector and on similarity. I started out, I say, look, you got it. Remember anybody read Curious George, the yellow man? You got a yellow man, you got a dog, you got a banana. All right. What are the similarities? Well, you could say the yellow man and the banana are both yellow. You could say the dog and the yellow man are living things. Right?
Yeah.
Can you have any similarities between a dog and a banana? When we gave the similarity test to a bunch of people who theoretically do mapping, and one of you guys works for Vanta, but I'm not going to name your name, and you all sue me if you want, that guy doing the mapping for Vanta actually said the dog and the banana are similar. And I said, how did you get? I wrote this up in a paper after that. I was so mad. I said, how did you get there? He said, my dog likes bananas. That was his personal similarity engine. That would never fly with an auditor. That would never fly with linguistic anything. And so that's, people work that way. Computers don't. They use word vectors. They use sentences. They use definitions to create these relationships. So when you go to Google and you say, I want to buy some apples, it will tell you where the grocery store is. But if you say, I want to buy an Apple earbud, it's going to tell you where the Apple store is because of the context.
Yeah.
They're still looking at the word apple, but apple is a different context.
That's a fascinating example.
And by the way, that's a real world example.
And the whole time I was trying to think of like, well, what's the similarity between a dog and a banana? What am I missing here?
there isn't one.
Okay, that makes me go.
Literally, I had to go to our artist and I said, okay, we're writing this. We're putting this in a white paper.
Yeah.
And so I started. We use that now to teach what computers do. So computers, you give them good rules. So that's the explainability part. Okay, it's the rules.
Yeah,
you can use the rules. You can take that to an ISO auditor, a PCI auditor, a PCAOB auditor. You could take that to Aon Insurance. You could take that to Lloyd's, and you could say, this is the rule set we're using. Great thing about computers they're not going to say the dog likes the banana because that's not in the rule set, right? So given this rule set, given definition encoded distance vectors, and the fact that we trained it on our corpora, and we said this term with this definition in this context, this term in this definition in this context, gives us contextual wiggle room. brings the risk way down,
Yeah.
that we can use it and gives us explainability. But the risk is massively high if you're not using your own corpora, because it's going to make stuff up. Excuse me. It's going to make stuff up. If you don't have that dictionary tied in, it's not going to know your contextual use. And again, it's going to make stuff up. So that's how you reduce the risk.
The flip side, I guess the flip side of that question, right? So that's where the greatest risk is. Where's the greatest opportunity?
Oh boy.
Or I guess where isn't the greatest opportunity?
Well, the realistic greatest opportunity right now is still in harmonization and deduplication, and because it brings clarity. You know, if you look at what some of these regulators write,
Mm-hmm.
you know, their job is to obfuscate the simple by using the worst terms possible to mean, you know, everyday things. And some of the stuff I read, I told my wife, if I ever come down with terminal cancer, I'm going to DC and I'm going to find some of the people who write these things, and I'm going to start slapping pies in their face. You know, I don't want to hurt anybody.
Bucket list for Dorian: go to DC with pie.
That's right. That's the, you know, if I'm dying, I'm going to DC with a whole bunch of whipped cream pies, and then starting smacking people till they throw me in the loony bin, because they obfuscate this stuff. But if you use AI to harmonize and deduplicate, first of all, the language is going to be a lot simpler, because AI is going to look at the personal indemnification policy of the usage of private data and go, oh, that's a privacy policy.
Yeah.
You know, and like, you know, that thing just shrunk to this, you know, must be, and they would say, you know, must be read, interpreted, and put into account for the, in other words, don't screw it up. So harmonization, deduplication simplifies it, tells the people at a 9th grade, 10th grade level what they need to do. Because, you know, trust me, I sit on a lot of boards. All my fellow board members, that's about their level of not education, but their level of listening to these things. I sat on a board meeting the other day, and a dude was like this, you know, and it was like, I was looking at over, and dude's watching TikTok. Like, man, we're listening to a security briefing, and you, because I'm getting every fifth word. But so, you know, that's the way you got to present compliance. That's the biggest win you can get right now. And if you're doing it with AI, the cool thing about AI, maybe we should throw another term in. It's called named entity recognition. I think I'm going to go and stick maybe a 16th or 17th term in here. Named entity recognition. So what that is it's reading. Let's go back to swing the tennis racket, you know, and turn off the faucet, spigot, whatever. It knows that those assets fall into classes. It knows that I should say those predicate, those subjects fall into classes. They can be assets that you have to configure. They can be processes you have to put into place. They can be records that you have to maintain and or fill out a certain way, because they'll actually tell you, maintain this record and ensure this is in it and ensure this is in it. And so the AI will read that and then hand over to Logic Gate. Hey, you know, this sentence says this. And by the way, this that you've got to do it to is now this thing that you better go find in, you know, that's going to be evidence later in an audit. And do you have that record? And you can pass that over to the records keeping people, and it has property, has metadata properties. You know, if PCI says maintain the blah, blah, blah record, you got to know that somebody's got to implement that. You're going to have to put in your records management policy, pass that over to them. AI will tell you that. You know, AI will tell you what to look for when auditing it, so you can pass that over to the audit. AI will do all of that while it's reading it, and it will all of a sudden understand it, make it a named entity, and then automatically say to Logic Gate, here's all the JSON LD you need to know about how to implement this and how to audit this. And people ain't going to do that. That's your biggest win right now, is making it simpler, and then also at the same time telling me how to implement it and then how to audit it.
Now I'm excited. Like, you're telling me I can make it simpler and for me to do my job and like know what I need to go do. That's incredible.
Once a word is in, once it's in the dictionary, like our compliance dictionary that we have has about 500,000 compliance terms. Mm-hmm. And auditors and implementers already have said, yeah, here's the named entities, and here's how you need to, this is what you need to do to implement them and maintain them and audit against them. And that's already in there. And that's the other cool part about AI and computer systems is once it's there, it's there. You don't have to think about it again. Yeah. Computer reads at the speed of electrons. It sees that and says, yep, I could pass that off. Boom, got it. Yeah. And then only comes up with the stuff it doesn't know.
So I didn't have any other questions like directly related. Is there any other like last thoughts you'd like to leave?
Yeah, they're actually a few. I took some thoughts on this. When GRC first started, and I was literally in the room when Mike Rasmussen came up with GRC. Lest anybody argue, Mike Rasmussen coined the term. I know, I was there. I wish I'd coined the term, but I didn't. Nobody had to think of as much about implementation of GRC as they have to do today because of AI. AI means if you're going to apply AI in GRC, and you're going to have to apply AI in GRC, it's the way it's going to go. Yeah. It's not like we're going backwards, guys. Yeah. Electricity's here to stay. If anybody's wondering, and AI is here to stay, just like electricity. It ain't going to go away. We're not going to be lighting with gas. We're not going to be going back to manual mapping and making stuff up. That means that you're going to be working with internal corpora and external corpora. You're going to be working with intelligence machines that you don't own, with data that you don't own, plus data you do own. You're going to be teaching a machine that sits somewhere in some cloud, owned by OpenAI, by Google, by Amazon. You think it's weird that Alexa is listening all the time. Now you're going to be giving it your policies, your procedures, your risks, your threats, your configuration guidance. So the very first thing you need to think through is who owns the data and what license model you want to use in order to apply AI at the GRC level. Because there are a lot of license models out there, and you are going to have to come up with a TDM, text and data mining license that applies to your content that you want to use in this tool. Because some of the shared learning is going to be shared with other people. What are you willing to sit into another model? What are you willing to be generated elsewhere? What are you willing to do whatever? And what must you keep secret? So that's the very first thing you have to think through. Before you think of your corpora, before you think of your dictionary, before you think of any of that, this is a new world where the license is affecting this. And is everybody bought in on it? Because you're going to have to get them bought in on it. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Like we already have examples like Samsung's IP loss because they didn't protect it in some way.
Right.
It's interesting to think about that through the lens of policies where you would expect you can kind of go two extremes with this. Is either this data sharing will improve everyone's policy making.
Rising tide lifts all boats.
Right. Or the flip side is, everyone's exposed because everyone knows everyone else's policies in some way.
Right.
And so it's an interesting, how do you walk that line of, or which way will it go? Is there a momentum shift? So it's definitely something that I'm going to do a lot more research on. And
so step one is really, how do you define a machine readable friendly license for in a cloud contribution environment? Mm-hmm. Okay, because there's this cloud content below everything, like the content that the UCF maps. It's all this regulatory stuff. Sitting on top of that is your data that you might or might not be sharing with other people. Sitting on top of that is the generative stuff that's going to be created out there. Okay, what's the data license your organization is willing to live with for machine readable environments? Because that's the environment you're coming into. It's all going to be compliance as code. In order to do continuous compliance, it's going to have to be compliance as code, machine readable at some point. What are you willing to live with? And then, before you even put your corpora in, how are you going to define and manage your dictionary? Because I was at RSA walking through how many vendors were out there talking about, we will go find your data and put it in, which means classification, taxonomies. You're going to have taxonomic structures, classification structures, and data dictionaries. That's part of that dictionary I was talking about. And every last one of the guys I talked to, how are you managing the data dictionary? Oh, we got our own. How are you managing the data? Oh, we got our own. We got our own. I said, do you guys ever talk to each other? They don't even have the same structures. I got 3 of them to talk to me. I won't name you guys. I won't out you. But wow, they very far from working with each other the right way. And so, how then are you going to structure your dictionary? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm for the very first time at the end of this month, I'm going to Boulder, and I'm presenting. I'm a member. That my company, not I. It's not the royal I. We are members of the Dictionary Society because we maintain compliance dictionary. And how far in back of this curve the dictionary guys are is I'm presenting for the first time a federated dictionary structure that I've got Oxford, Chicago, Prentice Hall, Merriam-Webster, Wordnik, and Free Dictionary to partner. Did I say Cambridge? Cambridge is in there too, to partner with. And I'm showing them everything that's wrong with how we're doing this API-driven structure to even work together. And we're the Dictionary Society. And if we don't get it together, and we don't have a standard way of querying and have a standard JSON that encompasses data dictionaries, if we can't agree on it, how can vendor A or B or C who don't do dictionaries for a living agree on it? We're not doing that until I think my presentation is June 1 in Boulder. If anybody's at the University of Boulder on June 1, come and see me afterwards. I'm pretty sure I'm going to need a whiskey. I'll buy. And we're literally, right before I got on the call to tape with you guys, I was seeing for the very first time how we're adding content from search to dictionaries and finding it from all those guys and finding it out of the ECFRs and the governance people and applying it to a corporate glossary, and how we're actually bringing it over for the first time with attribution and licensing so that a person can have a corporate glossary. And that's an alpha. That was that meeting, demo sprint right there. Yeah. It was a demo of a first sprint. If we're that far behind, hopefully by the middle of June, we'll have a way of talking to LogicGate about how you might want to apply a dictionary for this. We're definitely, I right after the meeting in January, I'm getting on an airplane right from Denver, flying straight to DC, talking to a whole bunch of multi-letter clients that are out there, and telling them how to put their dictionaries in, based on what we all agreed to in Denver the week before. Yeah. I will guarantee you I'll be writing that stuff up on the plane and telling our programmers what to put. And then it's going to have to go up to GRC Schema to become part of schema.org. Yeah. And then get in, and the industry ain't going to be ready till what? July, August, September. So plan now, but you have time because there isn't going to be real implementation till then. And if somebody's telling you that, the upside is, hey, you got some time and we're all talking about it and let's get it in and get it in right. The bad part is if somebody's out there telling you they're doing a generative AI and they're pulling it in with their corpora, yeah, they've got a bridge to sell you.
Yeah, that's fascinating. There's a lot in there, including just like the dictionary summit to define everything and how that naturally, like, there's this time, but in that time, even as people are starting to get ahead of that, there's risk there of like missing definitions. But at the same point, like, how do you prepare so that when it is ready to go and like take advantage of that?
As long as you're telling your board, hey, there's a lot of risk there. I don't know if you guys have seen the new SEC rules. The SEC rules for broker dealers and public companies say the board has to be aware of cybersecurity. The board has to be aware of continuous compliance. The board has to start, putting its threat and risk reports in inline XBRL. And I got to tell you, like 20 people know what that means. We do, we sat on the committee. And it's one of the things that, we're mapping in. But, how many CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs know how to read a human version of a report, a risk and threat report, and then ensure that it's the exact same thing coming out in inline XBRL? How many of them can do the human readability to machine readability? Yeah. And funny, because if it was actually built right, using markup and using legal XML or a Comanatoso or some of these things you guys have never heard of, we do a demo in-house where we could take the machine readable one and say, here's the URL for the machine readable one. It comes out in JSON and XBRL, and then you add .pdf, and it goes in, it reads it, it turns it into a human readable format from the exact same document, because you can embed all of that. And then the humans can read it and go, yes, that's what it says.
No.
Because even I can't read XBRL. And how many people have you even seen to be able to write that report and have it come out in machine and then change a part of the URL so that it's literally the same evidence, but now with this thing on the end of it, .html or .pdf or whatever, it now turns it into human readable.
Yeah.
You can do that, but I've seen 4 organizations to date, us included. Actually, that's 3 3/4 with this finger. Do it successfully.
That's fascinating. Yeah, like, and just to confirm that, you're saying that today you all can define the machine readable into the human readable, but the reverse of that is much more difficult and undefined.
You can't go this is so and we're going to ensure that we in LogicGate don't make the same problem. Okay. One of our past GRC partners, and past for a reason, we do all this mapping, and we did a whole bunch of mapping for one of the clients, all their policies, procedures, things like that, like $1.5 million worth of mapping. They put it into the GRC tool, and when they went to edit it, the GRC tool stripped out all the mapping because it uses just simple RTF, which is the background. That's the foundation to Word. And when you go into your whatever SaaS-based system, you get that little ribbon, bold, italic, all that stuff. It's either putting it into YAML or RTF or Markdown or docx, something like that. But it's not tagging it like SGML or XBRL or OSCAL if you're doing NIST. Or a Comanatoso or legal XML if you're doing international stuff, right? Those are all the structured frameworks for writing. And if you start out the human way, without doing it structured, if you start out in Word, if you start out just writing your policies and procedures in there, you ain't moving it over to a machine-based thing because there's no formatting under there that tells the machine this is what's going on. There's a really cool company. It's a really nice guy. I can't think of his name. I wanted to buy the company until I found out that everybody, he wrote these interpreters.
Yeah.
But I said, wow, that's really cool. I want to buy you.
Yeah.
I want to buy you. I want to put you on in because you have this interpreter and, you can interpret a word and you can put it into SGML or legal XML. Woo-hoo! I could just buy you, put a plug-in into everybody's writing a policy and procedure, and I can bring it into structured format. Because a lot of what the UCF does is take these documents and, get them into a structured format in our corpora. We have millions of dollars and 255 patent claims on how to do that. This guy was doing it, and I said, wow, that's a method I'd not seen before. I'm going to buy the company in the IP. Till I found out he has to manually do it for every company. Because there's no word-based thing that says when I write a policy or procedure, here's how we're going to structure it. So the best you could do is you could work with a GRC firm or a policy management company that's building structured policies, that's building structured documents to begin with, that's giving that machine the knowledge of what to do with this paragraph or that paragraph. NIST 853 took a very, very, very long time to restructure the writing of it so that it would come out in OSCAL, which is a structured vocabulary, so that that this paragraph is informational. That paragraph has a mandate. This paragraph talks about training. That paragraph talks about auditing. When terms come in, must, shall, may. Oh shoot! I was just doing a paper. It's probably a paper in back of the screen somewhere, and I can't show you my board because it's too far away. And I'm realizing, looking in here, you couldn't see it anyway. Of how we break down a sentence and say the organization must do this before that. Well, the must is a modal. Could also say shall. Could also say may. Do. Okay, well, now here's this thing. It's got a Bloom taxonomy to it. To what? Is there a time differential? Is there a, do this after that? So we're breaking it down into all of those things. NIST 853 in OSCAL is broken down into all of those things. You go tell me somebody's got a policy procedure manager today or a Microsoft Word document where they're going to go and tag all their text and say, this is modal. When it says have 8 characters, upper and lower case in the password, how many people are going to take the 8 characters and say, this is now an n-string variable, and n-string variable can be put in by the organization standards. By the way, that's what NIST 853 does, right? Because it brackets it. Yeah. That's the same thing we do when we're interpreting this stuff. We're putting all these brackets in. We're putting all this NLP stuff in underneath it. It's easier to start with structured text and do something with it than to write an interpreter to look at all the text and examine it, because that's where the NLP engine comes in. That's where your corpora and all that local training comes in, because we're basically training you to think like a machine so the machine can understand it. We're trying to my wife is, I'll get shot for this. My wife is famous for go get the thing.
Yeah.
Hey, go get that thing. The thing, it's over there by that other thing. Yeah, right. Tell a machine that, good luck. But, we've been married long enough. I actually get what the thing is by that other thing, because I know where the other thing was.
With enough training, right? We know
enough training. Exactly.
Right.
With enough training, you're going to teach the machine what the thing is.
Yeah.
In this context machine, the thing is the spatula.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. I've learned an incredible amount today.
Oh,
Just I appreciate so much. Would love to end on like a little bit of a fun note, if that's all right.
Sure.
We're trying out some of these new podcast segments. One of them is we're going to call Risk or That. And so, like a would you rather kind of so I love that you mentioned this. When you think about dystopian future AI, do you prefer Terminator or 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Oh, I would have to say I prefer Terminator because I never really understood the ending of Space Odyssey. I know where Terminator's going.
Yeah.
I know how to deal with that.
That's a fair. Probably the same way. I don't really get.
Yeah, and I'm still scared of how.
As we all are.
Yeah, yeah. Anytime I go in, I have a friend. Oh, I don't have one. He's got one of the big red glowing things in his man cave. And anytime the thing lights up, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm done with the whiskey.
So that's your cue to leave.
That's my cue to leave. I think he does it on purpose.
I was gonna say, he probably knows now.
Yeah. I'm very Pavlovian that way.
Flip side of that, who would you rather have as a best friend? Data from Star Trek or C-3PO from Star Wars?
I'm going to give a nod to you, John. I'm going to answer neither of the above. Q.
Okay.
John Delancey, because I know it. So yeah. I would, yeah, if you guys go into the Wayback Machine, type my name in, type Seabold, type John Delancey, type Leonard Nimoy, you'll see I launched a software company with these guys. And then I had to go pay penance for doing that and go to a Star Trek convention. I met Brent Spider, very, very, very nice man. But if I had to choose between the two, it would be C-3PO because I could probably play more tricks behind his back than Data because I don't think his head can go all the way around.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
And he's very British in his mannerisms.
Very much so. That's awesome. And then last one, and this one's a little bit more actual risk, but autonomous AI-driven cars or humans driving cars?
Humans, because there's explainability behind them, and I don't understand the autonomous part of the cars yet. Right, I know humans are going to do stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid stuff. Sorry. I know humans are going to do, so when you splice this, I know humans are going to do stupid stuff. And I could, if they're starting to swerve or whatever, I could figure that out. But for a car to blindly do something that I wouldn't be able to anticipate, I don't know enough of the rules yet that an autonomous driving system would apply to be able to anticipate while I'm human driving my car, it doing anything stupid.
It's I love that you say that. So I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you know anything about it, but we are terrible drivers. Sorry, entire
Is that
city.
The one with the river and the restaurant that goes up on the thing?
Yep, exactly.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
So there's
yeah, you guys can't drive.
3 rivers. So one thing, so my brother-in-law works for I don't know if I'm allowed to say this either, but he works for an AI kind of autonomous driving vehicle car. And the reason they picked Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh has this unspoken rule called the Pittsburgh left. And it is where you so 2 directions, left turn lane. The oncoming cars, if you have a green, you actually let the first car in the left turn before you go. And so the thought is, if AI can do it in Pittsburgh, it can do it anywhere.
Wow.
And so that's where they've been testing a lot of autonomous cars because there's Pittsburgh rules make no sense. And they put fries on their sandwiches. And those were the 2. And that's how they kind of start to test in the worst, riskiest scenario.
Wow. I'm glad I've never driven. I've always taxied through because I just go in to visit.
Yeah. And most bridges in the US, I think.
Yeah, there were a lot of bridges. And notice you and I share a corpora because I said, that thing going up to that place, and you went, yeah, the funicular to the restaurant.
Yeah, the incline.
Incline.
Big thing. Yeah. So
I see that's another thing. Funicular and incline. Same thing, 2 words, same meaning. You'd have to have a dictionary if this was an internal thing for our corpora.
You're writing a story about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for playing along with me on that one.
Well, thank you.
Fun.
Well, I'd love to come back, and I'd love to in between maybe even get a couple questions to answer from folks. everybody out there, I don't want to scare you. It shouldn't be a scary thing, but you do have to think through some things. And you have to bring your leaders in to let them understand the risk. If you're going to go forward, cool, just tell them what the risk is, and let them accept or not accept the risk. You're going to have to accept the risk when we're using it right now, and because we're all telling you it's going to lie. It's really not lying because it has no ethics. So it's going to do what it does. It's going to put content down that you asked it to put down. I thank you all for listening to the ramblings of a semi-madman today, and hope we got you thinking about some of this, because that's what you need to do.
You're selling yourself short, Dorian. Thank you for coming on. This was incredibly exciting. I'm pumped with what we're going to go and learn more about. And honestly, the next reading for my next couple weeks is going to be on all this. But and thank you all for all of you to listening to another episode of GRC Me. It's been a blast.
Thank you, everybody.